The massive doors of the Galactic Federation Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through those doors for what he knew would be the last time. His black diplomatic suit was perfectly pressed, his gray hair neatly combed, and his face showed no emotion at all. Behind him walked Admiral Lisa Carter, her military uniform sharp and clean. Her eyes cold as winter steel. Dr. Paul Stevens followed them, carrying a briefcase that contained 3 years of research data and diplomatic reports. The chamber was huge, built to impress and intimidate. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into shadows. Around the circular floor, representatives from dozens of alien species sat in their special seats, each designed for their particular body type. The Zephyrians looked like giant mantis insects, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. The Vorthan delegates resembled walking trees with thick, bark-like skin and branches for arms. The Kree Empire representatives were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes that never seemed to blink. Morrison took his place at the human section, a small area that had been added to the chamber 3 years ago when humanity first joined the galactic community. The seats were simple compared to the elaborate thrones and platforms used by the other species. This was intentional, he knew. Everything about humanity's treatment in this chamber had been designed to remind them of their place in the galactic hierarchy. Chancellor Vextar of the Dominion called the session to order. His voice came through the universal translator as a series of clicks and whistles, but the meaning was clear. We gather today to conclude negotiations regarding the Terran Federation's status within galactic society, he announced. The proposal before us is simple. Humanity will receive protected status as a developing species, with limited voting rights and territorial claims restricted to their current holdings. Morrison stood up slowly. He had heard this same offer, with minor variations, dozens of times over the past 3 years. Each time, humanity had asked for equal representation, equal rights, and equal treatment. Each time, they had been told that they were too young, too primitive, too dangerous to be given full membership in galactic civilization. The Terran Federation has reviewed this proposal, Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We find it unacceptable. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. The humans had rejected similar offers before, but something in Morrison's tone was different today. Furthermore, Morrison continued, the Terran Federation formally withdraws from all negotiations. We will no longer participate in these discussions. We are done. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The Zephyrian delegates began rapid clicking sounds that the translator couldn't keep up with. The Vorthan representatives rustled their branch arms in what humans had learned was their version of laughter. The Kree Empire's spokesman, a tall figure named Durkin, leaned forward with interest. The primitives finally understand their limitations, Durkin said, his words dripping with condescension. This is wise. Perhaps now they can focus on serving the galaxy in ways more suited to their capabilities. Admiral Carter gathered her files with mechanical precision. She had warned the Federation Council on Earth that this day would come. For 3 years, she had watched alien civilizations treat humanity like children. They wanted Earth's technology, especially their weapons, and faster-than-light travel systems. They wanted human soldiers to fight in their wars. They wanted human scientists to work on their projects. But they refused to treat humans as equals. The galaxy's major powers had made their position clear from the beginning. Humanity was useful, but dangerous. They were innovative, but unpredictable. They could be allies, but never equals. The best they could hope for was to be junior partners in someone else's empire. Dr. Stevens closed his briefcase and stood up. His research had revolutionized galactic science in just 3 years. His team had solved problems that had puzzled alien civilizations for centuries. His innovations had saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. And yet, every breakthrough had been credited to his alien supervisors. Every discovery had been claimed by the species that guided human research. This is a mistake, whispered Dr. Felinara, Stevens' Altarian research partner. The tentacled being had always been more respectful than the others, but even she had voted against humanity's proposal for equal representation just hours before. Your species has great potential. Do not waste it in isolation. Stevens paused at his seat and looked at the alien scientist who had become something close to a friend over the past year. Potential means nothing when it's not recognized, he said quietly. We'll develop it on our own terms. The chamber erupted in discussion as the human delegation began to file out. Some delegates seemed relieved that the troublesome humans were removing themselves from galactic politics. Others looked worried, though they tried to hide it. The Altarians, who had worked most closely with human scientists, appeared genuinely concerned about what this withdrawal might mean. Chancellor Vextar called for order. Let the record show that the Terran Federation has voluntarily withdrawn from negotiations. This session is concluded. His tone suggested that he viewed this as a minor inconvenience rather than a significant event. Morrison walked toward the chamber's exit, his steps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind him, Admiral Carter and Dr. Stevens followed, their faces showing no emotion. The other human delegates and staff members fell in behind them, creating a small procession that moved with quiet dignity toward the massive doors. As they reached the exit, Morrison turned back to face the chamber one last time. Hundreds of alien eyes watched him, some with curiosity, others with dismissal, and a few with something that might have been concern. The Terran Federation wishes the Galactic Council success in their future endeavors, he said formally. We will not be participating in them. The doors began to close behind the human delegation. Chancellor Vextar was already moving on to the next item on the agenda, something about trade disputes in the Outer Rim. Most of the delegates had already forgotten about the humans and were focused on their own concerns, but a few continued to watch as the doors sealed with a soft hiss. Dr. Felinara twisted. Her tentacles in what humans had learned was a sign of anxiety among her species. Trade Representative Zolkar of the Vorthan Commercial Collective was calculating something on his portable computer, his bark-like face creased with concentration. Even some of the Kree Empire's military advisors were exchanging glances that suggested they weren't as confident as their leaders about humanity's withdrawal. Outside the chamber, the human delegation walked through the corridors of the Federation station in complete silence. They passed alien civilians and officials who barely glanced at them. To most of the galaxy, humans were just another minor species, barely worth noticing. That was about to change. Captain Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant watching the last human transport ship leave New Geneva Station. The massive orbital facility had been humanity's embassy to the galaxy for over 10 years. Now it sat empty and dark, its docking bays sealed shut and its communication arrays powered down. The sight made his chest tight with emotion he tried to hide from his crew. Final transport has cleared the system, sir, reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh from her position at the communications station. Her voice was steady, but Brooks could hear the strain underneath. Ambassador Morrison's shuttle is now in hyperspace heading for Earth. Brooks nodded slowly. The evacuation had taken exactly 48 hours from start to finish. Every human diplomat, scientist, trade representative, and military advisor had been recalled from their posts across the galaxy. Some had been working on projects that would have benefited billions of people. Others had been deep in negotiations that could have prevented wars. None of that mattered now. The orders from Earth had been clear and simple. All humans were to return home immediately. All cooperation with alien governments was to cease. All joint projects were to be abandoned. No exceptions would be made for any reason. Take us out of orbit, Brooks ordered. Set course for the Sol system. The Defiant turned away from New Geneva Station and began its journey toward the hyperspace jump point. Behind them, the station grew smaller and smaller until it was just another dot of light against the stars. Brooks wondered if he would ever see it again. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the Situation Room of Strategic Command, addressing fleet commanders from across human space. Their faces appeared as holograms around the conference table. Men and women who had spent years building relationships with alien civilizations and now had to tear them all down. Operation Exodus is now in effect, Carter announced. All human colonies and outposts are to cease communication with non-human entities immediately. We are going dark. Commander Nick Davis, stationed at the mining colony on Kepler 442b, raised his hand. Admiral, what about the Centauri trade routes? Half the galaxy's commerce flows through our territory. If we close those routes, the economic impact will be enormous. Carter's expression didn't change. Close them. As of right now, human space is off limits to all foreign vessels. Any ship that approaches our borders will be warned once and then turned away. Any ship that refuses to leave will be destroyed. The implications hit the commanders like a physical blow. Humanity controlled 17 star systems, including some of the most important hyperspace routes in the galaxy. The Soul Transit Corridor alone carried 30% of all trade between the core worlds and the Outer Rim territories. The Kepler Junction was the fastest route to the resource-rich Vega sector. The Alpha Centauri system was the primary refueling stop for long-range exploration missions. Sir, said Commander Helen Foster from the frontier base at Volf 359, are we sure we want to take such an extreme position? This will hurt innocent people throughout the galaxy. Carter's jaw tightened. The galaxy had 3 years to treat us with respect. They chose to treat us like children instead. Now they can live with the consequences. The meeting continued for another hour as Carter outlined the complete withdrawal plan. Every human base would be sealed. Every human ship would return to Earth space. Every human citizen working in alien territory would be evacuated. The galaxy's major powers had wanted to keep humanity in a subordinate position, but they had never imagined that humanity might simply leave. Dr. Paul Stevens was already seeing the benefits of the withdrawal, working from his new laboratory. On Titan, he had made more progress in the past month than in the previous year of joint research with the Altarians. Without alien supervisors constantly questioning his methods and demanding adherence to their slow, cautious research protocols, his team was free to pursue their own ideas. We're finally able to work at our own pace, Stevens told his colleague, Dr. Kevin Mills, as they reviewed the latest test results. No more committees deciding whether our experiments are too dangerous. No more oversight boards questioning every decision we make. The quantum computing project that had been stalled for 2 years under alien supervision was now advancing rapidly. Stevens' team had discovered 3 new applications for their technology in just the past week. The improvements to faster-than-light communication alone would revolutionize human space travel. The Altarians were holding us back, Mills agreed. They kept saying our methods were too aggressive, too risky. But risk is how you make real discoveries. Similar scenes were playing out across human space. Without alien bureaucracy slowing them down, human scientists and engineers were making breakthrough after breakthrough. The weapons research that had been limited by galactic treaties was now proceeding at full speed. The terraforming projects that had been delayed by environmental concerns from tree-like Vorthan. Officials were moving forward rapidly. On the frontier colony of New Houston, Governor Patricia Hayes was dealing with a different kind of problem. Her world had been a joint colony with both human and alien settlers. Now that humanity was withdrawing from galactic society, the alien residents were demanding answers. You cannot simply abandon our trade agreements, insisted Merchant Captain Veltar of the Vorthan Commercial Collective. We have contracts, legal obligations. Hayes looked at the tree-like alien with cold eyes. Those contracts were signed under the assumption that humans would be treated as equals in galactic society. That assumption has proven false. The contracts are void? The Vorthan's branch arms rustled with agitation. This is unreasonable. You are punishing innocent traitors for the decisions of politicians. The decisions of politicians represent the will of their people, Hayes replied. Your people chose to treat us as inferiors. Now you can trade with someone else. Similar conversations were happening throughout human space. Alien merchants who had grown wealthy trading human goods were being expelled. Alien researchers who had built their careers on human discoveries were being sent home. Alien military advisors who had learned human tactics were being politely but firmly removed from their positions. the galaxy's initial reaction was dismissive. Chancellor Vexstar issued a statement calling humanity's withdrawal a temporary tantrum by an immature species. The Zephyrian Council predicted that humans would return to negotiations within 6 months. The Kree Empire's military leadership suggested that humanity's isolation would make them easier to control when they inevitably asked to rejoin galactic society, but some observers were already beginning to worry. The Altarian Science Council published a report warning that losing access to human research would set back galactic technological development by decades. The Vorthan commercial collective's stock prices began to fall as investors realized that their most profitable trade routes were now closed. Even some Kree military officers privately expressed concern about fighting future wars without human tactical support. Humanity had walked away from the galaxy, but the galaxy was just beginning to realize what they had lost. 6 months had passed since humanity closed their borders to the galaxy. The effects were spreading like cracks in a dam, growing wider and deeper with each passing day. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for hundreds of years were now broken. Commerce that had flowed freely through human space was now forced to find longer, more dangerous paths. Captain Helen Foster of the Vorthan Commercial Collective stood before an emergency council session on the trade world of Nexus Prime. Her bark-like face was creased with worry lines that hadn't been there a year ago. Behind her, holographic displays showed shipping routes in red indicating closed or severely delayed cargo runs. "We need access to the Soul Transit Corridor," she said, her voice tight with desperation. "Without it, our delivery times to the Outer Rim have increased by 300%. Our fuel costs have doubled. Our insurance premiums have tripled because we're forced to use routes that go through pirate-controlled space." The council chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of trading companies, all facing the same crisis. The Centauri Junction had been the fastest route to the mineral-rich worlds of the Vega sector. The Alpha Centauri refueling stations had been essential for long-range cargo haulers. The human-controlled hyperspace beacons had provided navigation data for the entire galactic shipping network. All of that was gone now. Trade. Representative Zolkar clicked his branch fingers against his podium. "The humans will return," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. "They need our markets more than we need their space lanes." Captain Foster's companion, a young Vorthan named Kassara, stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, our intelligence reports suggest otherwise. The humans aren't suffering from their isolation. They're expanding." A murmur ran through the chamber. Kassara activated a holographic display showing the edge of human space. Long-range sensors have detected new colonies in 3 previously uninhabited systems. The humans are building faster than ever before. The information was troubling. But most of the council members chose to ignore it. They had built their entire economic system around the assumption that humanity would remain a junior partner in galactic civilization. The alternative was too frightening to consider. Meanwhile, in the hidden research facility on Titan, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was experiencing the most productive period of her career. Without alien oversight committees questioning every decision, her team had made more progress in 6 months than in the previous 3 years combined. The quantum processing array is operating at 97% efficiency, she reported to her colleague Dr. Kevin Mills. The Altarian said this level of quantum coherence was impossible to maintain. They were wrong. Mills nodded as he reviewed the test data. "They kept insisting we needed their crystalline matrix technology. Turns out our synthetic alternatives work better and cost a fraction of the resources. The breakthrough was just one of many. Human scientists, freed from the cautious approach demanded by their alien supervisors, were pushing the boundaries of physics, chemistry, and biology at an unprecedented rate. The medical advances alone would have been worth decades of traditional research. We're developing treatments for diseases that have plagued the galaxy for centuries," Rodriguez continued. "But now we're keeping those treatments for ourselves." The galaxy's medical establishment was already feeling the impact. Human doctors had been pulled from hospitals across civilized space. Human medical researchers had abandoned joint projects that were close to breakthrough discoveries. Alien physicians who had grown dependent on human innovation were struggling to treat conditions that had become routine with human assistance. Dr. Felinara, the Altarian scientist who had worked with Paul Stevens, was facing her own crisis. Her research into faster-than-light communication had ground to a halt without human input. The humans had contributed ideas and approaches that her people had never considered. Now those insights were gone and her team was stumbling in the dark. "We need to request resumption of the research partnership," she told her supervisor during their weekly meeting. "The humans were essential to our progress." Supervisor Crendall's tentacles twisted with displeasure. "The humans were useful assistants. Nothing more. We can complete this research without them." But privately, Crendall was worried. The Altarian Science Council had built their reputation on steady, incremental progress. Human researchers had brought a chaotic, experimental approach that had accelerated their work beyond anything they had achieved before. Without that catalyst, their research was returning to its old, slow pace. The military implications were even more serious. The Kree Empire was discovering that their recent expansion into the Outer Rim territories was meeting unexpected resistance. Human intelligence networks had provided detailed information about enemy movements and capabilities. Human tactical advisors had helped plan operations that minimized casualties while maximizing effectiveness. General Marcus Kane, formerly a liaison officer with the Kree military, was now serving as Earth's Director of Intelligence. He read the reports from the Outer Rim with grim satisfaction. "Their casualty rates have increased by 60% since we withdrew our support," he told Admiral Carter during their weekly briefing. "Their advance has stalled completely in the Rigel sector." Carter nodded grimly. "They're fighting the same enemies with the same weapons, but without our tactical analysis, they're making the same mistakes over and over again." The Kree Empire's military leadership was beginning to panic. Their expansion plans had been based on the assumption that human support would always be available. Now they were facing determined resistance from the Outer Rim colonies with outdated intelligence and inferior tactical doctrine. Commander Beth Walsh, monitoring galactic communications from her post at the Luna listening station, was tracking the growing crisis. "The Zephyrian Council is requesting emergency trade negotiations," she reported. "The Dominion is asking for technical assistance with their food production systems. Even the Kree are sending diplomatic inquiries." Admiral Carter listened to the reports with cold satisfaction. "What's our response?" "No response," Walsh replied. "We're not acknowledging their communications at all." The silence from human space was more unsettling than any angry message could have been. The galaxy's major powers were accustomed to human complaints, human requests, human attempts to negotiate better terms. They had never experienced human indifference. That indifference was becoming more frightening with each passing day. Long-range sensors were detecting increased activity in human space. New ships were being launched. New colonies were being established. New technologies were being developed and deployed. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive and predictable was becoming something else entirely. They were becoming unknown. Chancellor Vextar received daily reports about the growing crisis, but he refused to acknowledge the severity of the situation. "The humans are isolating themselves," he told his advisors. "They're cutting themselves off from galactic civilization. This will weaken them, not strengthen them." But even as he spoke those words, Vextar was beginning to doubt them. The reports from the frontier were troubling. The economic data was alarming. The military intelligence was disturbing. Humanity had walked away from the galaxy 6 months ago. Now, the galaxy was beginning to realize that they might never come back. 2 years after humanity's withdrawal from galactic society, the crisis had grown from inconvenient to catastrophic. The galaxy's major powers were facing problems they had never imagined possible when they dismissed human concerns as unimportant. Trade networks that had operated for centuries were collapsing. Scientific research that had advanced steadily for generations was stalling. Military operations that had been routine were failing with devastating consequences. Prime Minister Rachel Green sat in her office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, reading the first official communication Earth had received from the galaxy in over a year. The message had arrived through encrypted channels, marked with the highest priority codes of the Dominion government. The sender was Chancellor Vextar himself, the same alien leader who had dismissed humanity as primitive just 2 years before. The Dominion wishes to discuss resumption of relations with the Terran Federation, the message began. Green noted the careful language, the absence of the condescending tone that had characterized all previous communications. We believe there may have been misunderstandings in our previous negotiations. We are prepared to reconsider certain aspects of our earlier proposals. Green shared the message with President Andrew Clark during their morning briefing. The president read it twice before setting it aside with a grimace. They're getting desperate, he said. But they're still trying to dictate terms. They want to return to the old system with minor adjustments? The intelligence reports support your assessment, Green replied. The Dominion's economy has contracted by 40%. Their military is struggling to maintain order in their outer territories. Their scientific establishment is falling behind pre-contact levels of development. The reports painted a picture of a galactic civilization in decline. The Zephyrian Council, once the most vocal opponents of human equality, was facing food shortages because their agricultural systems depended on human-developed fertilizers and pest control methods. The Vorthan Commercial Collective was hemorrhaging profits as their trade routes became increasingly dangerous and expensive. The Altarian Science Council had abandoned dozens of research projects because they lacked the human insights that had driven their recent breakthroughs. Most concerning of all was the military situation. The Nexus swarm, a hive-minded species from the Galactic Rim, had been contained for decades through a combination of military force and diplomatic isolation. The containment strategy had relied heavily on human intelligence networks and tactical analysis. Without that support, the containment was failing. General Marcus Kane reviewed the latest intelligence reports from his office in the Pentagon. The swarm had broken through the defensive lines in the Rigel sector and was advancing toward the core worlds. Their bioships were adapting to galactic weapons faster than the defenders could develop countermeasures. The situation was becoming desperate. The Kree Empire is requesting immediate military assistance, Kane reported to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They're offering us territorial concessions in exchange for tactical support? Admiral Carter leaned back in her chair. What kind of territorial concessions? Full sovereignty over the Proxima Centauri system and unlimited mining rights in the Vega sector, Kane replied. Plus recognition of human claims to any systems we colonize within 50 light years of our current borders. The offer was substantial, far more than humanity had ever been offered before. But the military leadership was unanimous in their response. Too little, too late, Carter said. We've moved beyond needing their permission to expand. The truth was that humanity had been expanding aggressively during their isolation. Captain Scott Turner commanded the first human exploration fleet to venture beyond the galaxy's edge. His ships had discovered 17 habitable worlds in the Magellanic Clouds, small satellite galaxies that orbited the Milky Way. The colonization potential was enormous. We've identified 3 systems that could support populations in the millions, Turner reported during a secure communication with Earth. The mineral resources are beyond anything we've found in our home galaxy. No signs of intelligent life, which means no political complications. The Magellanic Colonial Initiative had been approved within hours of Turner's report. Earth was committing massive resources to expansion beyond the galaxy, leaving their former neighbors to deal with their own problems. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer interested in being part of galactic civilization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was leading the scientific survey of the new colonies. Her team had made discoveries that would have revolutionized galactic science, but they were keeping the information classified. "We've found evidence of technological ruins on 3 worlds," she told her research team. The builders disappeared millions of years ago, but their automated systems are still functional. The implications were staggering. The ancient technology was more advanced than anything the current galaxy had achieved. With time and study, humanity might leap ahead of galactic civilization by thousands of years. The species that had been dismissed as primitive upstarts were on the verge of becoming the most advanced civilization in the local galactic cluster. Meanwhile, the galaxy's established powers were struggling to maintain their authority. The swarm had advanced to within striking distance of the core worlds, and the panicked alliance attempting to stop them was failing spectacularly. Their fleets were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Their colonies were being evacuated as bioships consumed entire worlds. Chancellor Vextar was facing the collapse of everything he had worked to build. His empire was fracturing as member species lost faith in the Dominion's ability to protect them. His military commanders were reporting defeat after defeat. His economic advisors were warning of complete financial collapse within months. In desperation, he authorized a final message to Earth. This time, there was no attempt to maintain dignity or negotiate from a position of strength. The message was a plea for help from a dying civilization. The Dominion formally requests Terra's immediate assistance in containing the swarm threat, the message read. We are prepared to offer full recognition of human sovereignty, equal voting rights in all galactic institutions, and territorial concessions beyond anything previously discussed. We acknowledge that our previous treatment of humanity was inappropriate and ask for your help in this crisis. President Clark read the message to the assembled leadership of Earth's government. The room was silent as he finished. The offer was everything humanity had asked for 3 years ago, and more. Equal status, territorial rights, recognition as a major power. It was everything they had been denied when they needed galactic support. The vote is unanimous, Clark announced after a brief discussion. Earth's response is simple. We are no longer interested in galactic affairs. We suggest they solve their own problems. The message was transmitted within hours. Its brevity was more devastating than any lengthy condemnation could have been. Humanity had moved beyond caring about galactic approval. They had found their own path among the stars, and they were not looking back. As the human fleet prepared for its next wave of expansion into the Magellanic Clouds, the galaxy they had left behind continued its slide toward chaos. The great civilizations that had once looked down on humanity were now facing extinction, while the species they had scorned blazed a trail toward a future among the infinite possibilities of the cosmos. 3 years had passed since humanity walked away from galactic civilization, and the universe had become a very different place. The species that had once dismissed humans as primitive upstarts were now facing extinction while humanity blazed trails through unexplored space with technology that made their former neighbors look like children playing with simple tools. Commander Scott Turner stood on the bridge of the UES Pioneer as it entered orbit around New Terra, the first major human colony in the Magellanic Cloud. Through the viewports, he could see a world that had been transformed in just 18 months from a barren rock into a thriving center of human civilization. Cities sprawled across the continents, their lights visible even from orbit. Orbital platforms surrounded the planet like a mechanical ring, processing resources and manufacturing goods at a rate that would have been impossible using old galactic technology. Colony reports are coming in from all sectors, announced Lieutenant Sarah Brooks from the communications station. New Sydney has reached a population of 2 million. New Denver is reporting successful terraforming completion ahead of schedule. The mining operations on Kepler Prime are exceeding all projections. Turner nodded with satisfaction. Humanity had established 47 colonies in the Magellanic Clouds, each one more successful than galactic experts had thought possible. The ancient technology they had discovered on those dead worlds had revolutionized everything from faster than light travel to planetary engineering. What had once taken decades of careful development could now be accomplished in months. Back in the Milky Way, the galaxy's established powers were struggling with a reality they had never imagined. The Nexus swarm had advanced to within 3 systems of the core worlds, and the panicked alliance attempting to stop them was falling apart. Their fleets were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Their colonies were being evacuated. As bioships consumed entire star systems, Chancellor Vexstar sat alone in his private chambers, reading the latest reports from the front lines. The Dominion had lost 12 major worlds in the past month. The Kree Empire was retreating on all fronts. Even the proud Zephyrian Council was preparing to abandon their homeworld and flee to the Outer Rim. Territories, a soft chime announced an incoming message. Vexstar's aide, a young Dominion officer named Krental, entered the chamber with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we have received a response from the Terran Federation." Vexstar's heart raced with hope. Perhaps humanity would reconsider their position. Perhaps they would offer assistance in exchange for the concessions he had already authorized. Perhaps there was still a chance to save galactic civilization. "What do they say?" he asked. Krental's mandibles clicked nervously. "The message is very brief, sir. It reads, 'The Terran Federation is no longer interested in galactic affairs. We suggest you solve your own problems.'" The words hit Vexstar like a physical blow. There was no anger in the message, no bitterness, no desire for revenge. There was only indifference, and that was somehow worse than any insult could have been. Humanity had moved beyond caring about their former neighbors. They had found something better among the stars. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was working in her laboratory on New Terra, analyzing samples from the ancient ruins that dotted the planet's surface. The technology she had discovered was beyond anything the current galaxy had achieved. The builders of these ruins had mastered forces that galactic science barely understood. They had built machines that could reshape matter at the atomic level, engines that could fold space-time like paper, and computers that operated on principles that shouldn't have been possible. "We've decoded another section of the archive," she told her assistant, Dr. Kevin Mills, as they reviewed the latest findings. The builders called themselves the Eternals. They spread across dozens of galaxies before disappearing into some kind of higher dimension. Mills studied the translated text with wonder. They left behind instruction manuals for technologies we can't even imagine. Weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Ships that could travel between galaxies in days instead of years. The galaxy back home never had access to anything like this. The irony was not lost on either scientist. The galaxy that had treated humanity as inferior had been playing with toys compared to the tools humanity was now discovering. The species that had condescended to human researchers were now struggling with problems that could be solved easily using ancient eternal technology. "Should we share any of this with them?" Mills asked. "It could help them fight the swarm." Rodriguez considered the question carefully. "The President's orders are clear. We maintain complete isolation from galactic affairs. Besides, they had their chance to treat us as equals. They chose to treat us as servants instead." Meanwhile, President Andrew Clark was reviewing reports from across human space. The expansion into the Magellanic Clouds was proceeding ahead of schedule. The development of eternal technology was opening possibilities that had seemed like science fiction just a few years ago. The human population was growing rapidly as new worlds were settled and terraformed. "We've received another communication from the Altarian Science Council," reported Prime Minister Rachel Green during their daily briefing. "They're offering to share their complete research archives in exchange for any assistance we might provide." Clark set down the report without reading it. No response. "We're not interested in their research anymore. We have access to technology that makes their archives look like children's books." The transformation of humanity was complete. The species that had once begged for recognition from galactic civilization had become something greater than any of their former neighbors had ever imagined. They had found their destiny among the ruins of a civilization that had transcended the physical universe itself. General Marcus Kane monitored galactic communications from his office in the Pentagon, watching the final collapse of the civilization that had rejected humanity. The swarm had reached the core worlds. The Dominion was evacuating its capital. The Zephyrian Council was requesting asylum in the Outer Rim territories. The Kree Empire was fragmenting as member species fled in all directions. Any final communications? From the galaxy? Asked Admiral Carter during their weekly meeting. Nothing we're responding to, Kane replied. They're too busy fighting for survival to worry about diplomacy anymore. Carter nodded grimly. How long do the analysts think they have? 6 months at most before total collapse? Kane answered. The swarm will consume the core worlds, and what's left of galactic civilization will scatter to the rim territories. As the meeting ended, Carter looked out the window at the construction ships, building humanity's next generation of starships. These vessels would carry human explorers to galaxies beyond the Magellanic Clouds, seeking new worlds and new discoveries. Among the infinite possibilities of the cosmos, the talks had indeed failed. But humanity had found something far more valuable than acceptance from a dying civilization. They had found their true potential among the stars, and they would never look back.